Welcome everybody to my talk today. Today I'll be discussing shiny object syndrome and how to avoid it. The way to define shiny object syndrome is basically that feeling when, as developers, we're pressured quite often by very short deadlines on our projects. And occasionally we get hung up with some really deep technical problems that we need to solve. And to be fair, a lot of times, we hit this point of despair where we don't think we're going to solve things. And then along comes this, project, or we get, exposed or notified that something is out there, tooling that could help us solve our problems. And we, in our desperation, we just go with it, right? And we deploy, we implement, we read up on the project, we implement it. But then later on down the road, we discover that the choices we made weren't probably the best using these newfound solutions. In any case, what I'm going to be talking about again is basically what I call shiny objects and how to avoid them. So before we get going, I'll just introduce myself real quick. My name is Angel Rivera. I'm a developer advocate for CircleCI, and I started my career off in the United States Air Force. I was working for U.S. Air Force Space Command, which is now U.S. Space Command, I believe. So when I started my career off in the Air Force, I was basically very new to software development in the professional sense. And when I was developing software, pretty much in the blind and in isolation, right? So back in the day when we were developing software, we developed the software on a local machine. And when we had things working pretty much in the sense that we met the requirements, we packaged it up and then put it on a floppy or a CD, or maybe even shared it on a network share so that our ops team, right, system administrators, could grab that release and then deploy it to whatever application server we were targeting. But that didn't sit well with me. So I would write code, and I really cared about, like, okay, so I wrote this code. And then I'm going to ship it off into the void, this black box, right? And never see it again. And the only time you really got any kind of feedback about the software was when things were going wrong, right? The system administrators would come back to you and say, hey, this build is broken, or there's something wrong with your application. It's not running right. But there was really no other interaction. It was almost like two camps. But that didn't sit well with me. So I would go down, to the sysadmin data center and then knock on the door and ask them, and actually hand deliver this software, these releases, and basically trying to wedge my way in so that they would get familiar with me and understand that, I was trying to figure out what else I could do to make their jobs easier, as well as understand what they were doing with my code. After a few attempts, they were pretty apprehensive about me trying to basically figure out what it is that they were doing. But once they realized that I just cared, the floodgates opened, right? And they welcomed me in with open arms and showed me how to actually even deploy my application. So it kind of went from, who is this guy, this developer trying to, kind of infiltrate our operation, to, hey, come on in, developer, and help us, with your application. So at the end of the day, the value for them was I was coming in and easing their lives, right, by helping them debug live and stuff. So with that context, I wanted to tell a story about my encounter with shiny object syndrome. So early on in my career, I was working on a team, and we were really strong in DevOps, before even DevOps was a thing, right? So in this team, we had some very experienced and skilled people, and we worked really well together. We had good communication skills. We had good empathy, right? So everybody kind of was friendly with one another, actually really cared about the project that we were doing. So we treat each other really, really well as we just had a great group of guys and gals that were just badass, right? So again, just wanted to set the stage that, with this team I'm going to be talking about, we were really, really well connected, well communicative, and again, had a strong DevOps culture. So we were given a new directive, right, to build out these new features for our web UI. And these were features that were really needed by our customers and well desired by our customers. But the problem was we were still working with a kind of, I would say, a 2D or flat relational data model on the back end. And if you're a JavaScript developer or a web UI developer, and in today's modern day of development, these 2D flat structures don't really work well. So one of the things we wanted to do was start using newer tools. And in order to do that, we had to change the way we were modeling our data. And we had to change into a hierarchical data model. So if, to give it the robustness that it needs, and then the nesting that we were trying to achieve within the data. So this basically required us to implement more of a JSON kind of approach to the data. Now, the problem is, at least at that point in time, there weren't that many solutions out there, right, to help us solve this problem. We actually, like I said, were very skilled, very experienced, but even a team of that nature, right, we were having issues, deep issues, which were extremely frustrating. Frustrating to the point where we didn't think we were going to finish this project on time and within, the constraints that were set. So one day I was just, contemplating the problem that we were having, and coincidentally, I was working on a side project, a personal side project, and I was learning MongoDB. So I was using MongoDB, right, in this project, this personal project, and then the light bulb kind of went off and said, whoa, wait a minute. This system, MongoDB, basically has the data at rest, right, in the representation that we need. So basically it was a non-relational format, and it basically was JSON, right, the actual hierarchy in the data model that we needed. So I went back to the team and I pitched MongoDB. I showed them, I did a quick mock-up of a MVP to show them the capabilities. And the team was just like, wow, this is our solution. They loved it. So we went quickly on, we agreed with our development team. And then also we got the buy-in from the ops team. And we decided to go ahead and implement MongoDB as our solution for these new web features. So our ops team stood up the MongoDB infrastructure per the MongoDB recommendations. And I quickly worked with them to stand this up and ensure that we were at least following the best practices that were given by MongoDB. Everything was working out really, really well. Now remember, I was the only one really with MongoDB experience. I mean, at the time we were standing up this infrastructure, we were just going off by documents and things on the internet. But again, we were kind of under a hard deadline, so we were pushing really, really hard. But I just want to make that point that throughout this process, I was the most experienced with MongoDB on the team, and I had pretty much almost no experience, so to speak, right? So keep that in mind with the story. So again, we made quick work of building out the application now that we had a mechanism to store the data in the way we needed it, and basically, provide the data to the application in the model or in the structure that it needed. So our teams built out the MVP really, really quickly. The operations team stood up the MongoDB infrastructures that we needed for production, and then we deployed this new release to the production. Our team was happy, management was happy, and we met our deadline. We were under budget, and again, everybody was super happy with how all this went. Our customers were extremely happy with these new features that we released. It was helping them get their work done quicker, and also gave them some visibility into data that they didn't have previously. So all in all, life was good, right? Again, we were all super happy. Management, our team was happy with the work we had done, and also our customers were ecstatic about the new features. Until, right, 90 days later, fast forward, Mongo starts kicking off alerts. We're getting, looking at the system, we're looking at high disk thrashing, CPUs are pinned, memories just through the roof. The performance obviously started declining, customers started calling and, giving us basically some reports that, there's outages or the system was timing out for them. So yeah, we were in a kind of a panic mode, figuring out what's going on. So again, the sharp team that I had, we jumped into troubleshooting mode. We rolled up our sleeves, started looking through the system to figure out what was going on. And while we were looking through the system, we quickly found what was causing the issues with the MongoDB service. Apparently, the users liked the application so much, and within that 90-day period, they had populated the system with over 15 million documents, or in MongoDB, records are documents. And you would think that, okay, well, this is a database system, right? It should be able to handle all of these records and then some. And you're right, they should have been able to do that. But what happened was, when we looked a little bit deeper under the hood, my queries, the queries that I primarily wrote were terrible, number one, and also bad indexing, right? So MongoDB is referred to as a NoSQL system, right, or non-relational system. And I was trying to write relational type schemas within MongoDB. So just for future reference, if you're using MongoDB, no relational means no relations, right? So don't try to hack and do what I did. Try to hack up a relational model within a NoSQL system. It just doesn't work. It's not intended to work that way, especially with the data. So again, I had written some in-app data schemas as well. Again, linking, using link tables and such within a non-relational system is not good. So in order to triage the problem, we figured, we just did some math, right? Okay, well, the system worked great up until about 15 million records. So what we did was, and we were lucky that the system was more of a real-time system. So all the users really cared about was the latest and greatest data. So in order for us to triage this, we took a good percentage of the records that were older and not quite as accessed, and moved them over temporarily into a different store so that the system would recover, which it did. But the problem was we already had the bad customer experience, right? We did recover the system rather quickly, but again, the users and our customers had really bad experiences, right? Our organizations lost time and money, which was never a good thing. But the biggest, damage, I believe, to our team was the fact that, we lost a lot of street credibility with our management, with our customers, and amongst ourselves as well, right? Like again, I worked on a really proud team that was really prideful of our work, and to have these mistakes happen really hurts, to say the least. So after the incident, as all good teams do, we conducted a hot wash or a post-mortem to figure out what the hell was going on and hopefully never repeat that problem again. So obviously, right, bad programming, definitely the queries and the data schemas that were set up. We, in our rush to get things done, we actually neglected all of our usual procedures, right, and processes that help us identify issues early on, like load testing. We did none of that, right? So had we done a modicum of load testing, we would have been able to discover that we're going to have problems later on down the line as the system gains volume in data, right? So again, we neglected to do any kind of testing, our usual, right, rigorous testing against the system. Just didn't happen. We figured, oh, it works, let's just go with it. And again, we were kind of delusional in the sense of just being happy that we found this solution in our desperation. So obviously, we didn't vet MongoDB properly, and that was a big problem. We didn't understand. Again, I didn't understand the relational, non-relational models, and also we didn't understand as a whole the capabilities and deep understanding of how MongoDB, the system, worked. Again, we just deployed this thing based off of white papers, and that's how we operated all throughout. So MongoDB wasn't the problem here. The product wasn't the problem. It was basically us as a team. We didn't follow any of our existing processes and procedures. We kind of circumvented our rigorous operations as far as like quality and testing. Again, MongoDB wasn't the problem here. It was basically the team, myself, and then the rest of the team, just kind of, going through the process without really following our standard operating procedures and testing guidelines. So what I want to talk about next is how to avoid shiny object syndrome. A couple tips that I feel are pretty important that I learned from that experience. So number one is don't believe your own hype, right? So what I mean by that is the issue, again, was more of a culture issue. We were, like I said, a very, very well-oiled machine in regards to being a team. And we were pretty cocky, I have to say. Some of us used to go around saying we were the A team, yeah? And I'm here to say that, even though you have good DevOps culture, there is such a thing as having too good of a DevOps culture, right? We were the victims of our own kind of arrogance and basically a victim of our own arrogance at this point. So I would be cautious and warn you that, if you start seeing any kind of behaviors where people are cutting corners, it's okay to do it once in a while. And I stress okay, very, I'm going to say you have to use that with caution. But when you're in a pinch and you're fixing problems and solutions, okay, you can take more risks because of what do you have to lose? The system's down. But in general, when you're operating normal day-to-day development or operations, I definitely would keep an eye on how folks, I guess, the demeanors are, right, in regards to the work, in regards to communication. Because that's what ultimately bit us, right? Is we believed our own hype and no one was talking to each other because we made a lot of assumptions. So the other tip I would definitely give you is thoroughly vet these new technologies. Have a deep understanding of what it is that you're implementing within your infrastructures. As you can tell, with the story I told you, we were all desperate and we kind of just let our guard down because of that desperation. Try to, avoid that, of course, but also, have a deep understanding of that tech. It's really important because it may work for you, 3 months in, 6 months in, even 12 months in, excuse me, but eventually you need that knowledge of what that system basically is capable of. It's also what its requirements are, what the maintenance plans are for these systems, right? That's where a lot of folks kind of get bit, is not understanding and having a deep understanding of the technologies that are implemented throughout their infrastructures. So one of the things that I will stress as well is don't break protocol, right? So another contributing factor to this outage was us not, following our own protocols, right? That we so vigorously enacted, and we also maintain these things, right? In iterative processes. So if you don't have checklists, I definitely recommend, or if you don't follow checklists, I definitely recommend you opening up the books, document things that you do, and follow those checklists. Even if it's tedious and cumbersome, it will save you in the end from potential problems. And for those of you that don't have protocols or SOPs or standard operating procedures or checklists, I would definitely recommend that you make some. I work with startups quite often. I work with new teams. And when you're starting out, documentation is the last thing on your mind, but in reality, it should be one of the most important things. And the reason is, let's say you're a startup. I see this all the time when startups are kind of coming into their own and they start working with bigger customers and clients. Let's say maybe financial institutions. They're going to want this documentation. I can promise you that. You have to certify with their security teams. You have to certify with their business processes. So have these documents, even if it's in code, right? Definitely, document the things that you do and your processes. Again, because you're going to need them for compliance. And you're also, it just brings a bit of continuity, right? To your team and to your company, to your organization. So if you have everything documented, it's easier for new people to kind of onboard and understand how the system is actually working. I can't tell you how many times, I've hired folks, brought them on, and they sat there for about 3 weeks learning how different systems they're working on in that particular company, how they all kind of interacted and integrated. That time could have been better spent having them, read through maybe some configuration as code or some documentation that we have for our products. But to say the least, definitely start looking at SOPs and documenting. I know it's not a developer's most favorite thing to do, but I promise you it will be super important in the future, and it will save you a lot of pain also in the future as well when you're dealing externally. So one of the other things that we had an issue with was we had a mentality of set and forget it for some reason for this project. Again, I think this was driven by the assumptions that we made, being, again, a well-oiled machine, super experienced. And everybody just assumed that everybody else was kind of handling, their business when it came to the system. But the reality was that we did the bare minimum and then kind of did a set it and forget it. So yeah, try to avoid this, or at least be able to identify it when it's happening. And I also want to say that, one of the things that I came to the conclusion was that technology is not about, technology is about people. It's not about, the actual technology itself. It's about making our lives easier, making our lives more efficient, and having our data be as clean as possible, right, and as accurate as possible. And when you have people, they form cultures, right? And when you have cultures, that's basically setting the stage, right, for the way you communicate with one another, the way you operate in your clusters of teams, and the way you treat each other, right? So culture is really important when you have people. Obviously, they're one, in my opinion, they're one and the same. And you have to keep a healthy culture when you have people. Great. Now that I covered the shiny object syndrome that I encountered, right, and then the tips that should help you avoid at least the situation I was in, I'd like to talk about people in general, right? Since bringing up culture and talking about people and technology, I just wanted to refresh us as humans and individuals on some of the skills that we need to interact and and build the cultures that we want within our teams. So I'm just going to share some of the things that I think are super important and have been important in my career as a manager, and then I'm going to talk about some of the things we can do as individuals, right? All of us. So let's talk about managers. Early on in my career, like I said, I was in the military, and I truly believed in the phrase. I don't know if you've ever heard it before, but lead by example. And I truly believe in that, that concept. But early on in my career, I always, when I started managing folks, I realized that, you know, there were folks that were feeling intimidated because I was a manager, right? So I would see them holding back. And I mean by holding back is if I would ask for ideas or I wanted some sort of, feedback from them, it was always guarded and kind of, like it felt like they were intimidated. So I started developing this management style, what I call pseudo management. And it's a pretty simple strategy. When I went into work with teams, I would tell them, look, I am a peer, right? On a day-to-day basis, I am a resource for you. I'm part of the team. I am a peer. And I'm going to operate that way because they all know I'm the manager, right? I have the title. I have whatever authority. But at the end of the day, when we're working day to day, that doesn't need to be, right, at least established. They understand that. So it actually worked out really well. I was a resource. Some teammates, I would put them in leadership positions or roles for a week and let them drive the project, and me sitting back as a resource, right? So yeah, anytime I needed to do, the reason why I call it pseudo was because anytime I needed to do anything, HR related or managerial type tasks, I would just tell them, all right, team, I'm pseudoing up. So for the next few hours, I need to handle a couple of managerial type tasks. And then when I was done with that, I'd let them know, hey, I'm exiting gracefully, right? And then I'm back to play as a teammate. Again, this style for me was really interesting because I wanted to diminish or at least tear down these intimidation barriers that came with just the stink of being labeled a manager, yeah? So that's pseudo management. If you can employ a similar strategy, I think it would be worth your while. Yeah, as a manager, I also realized and recognized the importance of empowering my people, enabling them to make choices, right, without having to ask for permission. This is really important, and I believe that once you start empowering your people and setting reasonable ways to operate and allowing them to take ownership and make decisions, you're going to see that they're going to engage a lot more. You're going to get a lot more productivity out of them because they're owning their ideas, and they're actually going to start forming really strong opinions about their ideas, and then that hopefully will will turn into passion. And once you have a passionate developer, right, the world is open to all kinds of innovation. So definitely, again, empower your folks and give them the ability to be free thinkers and drive decisions within your teams and projects. This is a really, really important slide. It's embracing failure, right? So we all know as software developers, the only way that we write good software is by failing to write good software, right? So writing the junky, broken code filled with bugs and then going back and fixing all of that, right? That's the true beauty of what we do as developers. And we need to embrace failure. So as managers, if you have developers that are constantly maybe getting failed builds or whatever, that's fine as long as those builds are being fixed, right? Because at the end of the day, when we're developing software, we're not going to know we have bugs until we test it, right? And until we fail those tests, then, right, the true value comes in, where we'll be able to fix those problems quickly. And hopefully the developers will learn something in the fixing of those problems and then not recreate those problems in the future, right? So it's just basically iterative learning by failing and then fixing and then succeeding. So again, embrace these failures. Don't play the blame game. It really doesn't do much for your culture. It doesn't do much for people who are working under you and who are trying to learn, right, and succeed. definitely embrace it. And the biggest thing is just learn from it so you don't do it again, or at least understand that, you know, if you have a failure, that's okay, and chalk it up to, right, a learning. So mentors, this is really important as well. So we all have varying degrees of experience on teams, and when we bring on junior developers, especially, we definitely need to have this mentorship kind of mentality within the culture. I definitely implement that when I was managing folks. You know, I would force them on Fridays, brown bag, bring your ideas, bring some sort of talk, right? A 10-minute talk on any topic. It didn't matter. It didn't have to be technology related. Of course, most of them were. But at the end of the day, you know, again, it would enable folks to kind of freely talk to one another about just any old topic and ask questions as such. But mentorship, again, is really important. We need to make time as managers for that. But we also have to set up, right, guidelines so that we're not doing, as a mentor, you're not giving, I don't say too much advice, but being way too open and almost to the point where you're doing the work for them. That's not mentorship. But at the end of the day, definitely establish that within your culture early on, right? It's really important. Yeah, this is a good one too. So making hard choices. Occasionally, right, we're going to have a tough time on our teams, especially with folks, not necessarily technology, but when you have teammates or team members that are not performing as, you know, as well as they should, and if you've taken all of the, you know, I want to say time to train them and try to help them, right? To try to help them become more proficient. Occasionally, it's not going to be enough, right? There's just going to be a point where maybe the teammate or team member is just not engaged as they used to be, or they're just, it's not a good fit, and that's okay. I would suggest trying to find them a new location, maybe on another team in the company, or at least maybe if you have contacts in other organizations, help them, you know, find another avenue for them to be employed. But at the end of the day, it's the hard choices that we need to make, because if you don't, I've been in a situation before where I just let things lie, and it really nearly almost destroyed a really good team that I had in the culture that we had built. And you know, there's could be some hard feelings, but at the end of the day, we got to make those hard choices to keep our teams moving in the direction that we need them to. So yeah, now that I've covered managers, let's talk about what we can do as individuals. Some of the skills and some of the behaviors that we have. And by the way, these are all behaviors that I've seen in myself and others on my teams. So the one thing that you can get me to have a really harsh discussion with you with is if you approach me with this type of attitude, right? I'm not a manager. Yes, this is true. As individuals on teams, more than likely, you're not a manager. But at the end of the day, that doesn't stop you from being a leader, right? One of the things I always instituted on my team is, you know, I want to see passion, and I want to see kind of initiatives, right? Initiatives, yeah, I guess. People just taking control of decisions and projects. I removed all of, well, at least most of the barriers for intimidation and fear for you know, making decisions. So I expect folks to adopt I am a manager kind of, or I am a leader attitude instead of I'm not a manager. Because you are on a team, and the team will rely on you for your skills. There's a reason why you're there. You're there to contribute. And as a manager or as an individual, we should do our best to you know, contribute as best we can without fear. Yeah, if you're an individual and you write code or in any other scenario, yeah, if something's broke, do your best to help fix it. I can't tell you how annoying it is when a developer who understands what's going on with someone else's code, maybe they have a, you know, did a push upstream and they're doing a code review and they realize, oh, wow, this is broken. Maybe a senior developer is reviewing a junior developer's code. And then they just comment, oh, this isn't going to work. And they leave it alone. Right? No recommendations, no suggestions, no solutions. Oftentimes enough, what I generally do is if I see something like that, I go in and I actually, if I'm able to, I'll fix the code for them. Like, wow, this is a glaring bug, right? Let me go and fix it and you know, commit that change and then push it upstream where they can make a pull request against it. It just saves time, money, and it also is a teaching moment as well for the person who wrote that code. right? You can actually, I know it may seem like you're doing their work for them, but at the end of the day, it's really not. It's more of a teaching experience from my perspective. So yeah, if something's broke, please fix it. Yeah, this is more for mentees. So yeah, I don't know if everybody knows, but there's a site a site called Let Me Google That For You, and it's a term that's used from at least from me as a mentor to mentees. Often enough, as mentees, we have a really good mentor that's a little too good because they're answering all the questions right away instead of having you do the research. What I mean by this is, as a developer, I would say 90% of our job is learning. And you need to have really good research skills, right? So if you're having issues with code or bugs, great. You need to learn how to, search the web or communicate with other folks in your industry to maybe, help you fix those bugs. The other piece of that is, if you're new to code as well, and maybe you're uncomfortable with researching, you don't know where to start, that's okay. Go to your mentor, ask them, I need some help. But you have to also contribute to your own learnings, right? I tell folks that I mentor, try to research a problem for about 15 to 20 minutes. If you still don't have a grasp about it or an understanding, then you can reach out to the mentor, right? We have to respect the mentor's time as well as your own, but 20 minutes is a good gauge. I've had folks where they were afraid to come and they felt like they were bothering me as a mentor. And they would spend, this one instance, a person spent 2 days researching and spinning their wheels instead of reaching out. Yeah, don't do that as a mentee. I would say, again, 15, 20 minutes, do your best to, research and understand the problem before you reach out. Yeah, so this is a skill that I think we all can improve on. I know myself personally, I struggle with this, especially when I'm in large meetings or team meetings where, we're discussing technology. Again, we all have on teams, we're all varied in experience levels. And myself personally, I'm from New Jersey. We're a fast-paced breed here, in New Jersey. So when folks are describing issues, occasionally I've already experienced those issues, maybe on a project years ago, and I know the solution. But on the same token, and sometimes I want to just get the solution out there for them. But I have to refrain because sometimes when they're discussing the problem and we're having a back and forth, I try to lead them to the solution. But a lot of times they figure it out just by talking it out with someone, right? They figure out the problem on their own, which is pretty cool to watch the light bulb go off while you're in conversation. So again, pick up some skills in listening and always iterate on that, right? Improve your listening skills. And a lot of it has to do with learning how to communicate, to be fair. Listening and communicating, yeah, they're related, but I believe communication skills are a little bit different, right? So one of the things that I know I struggle with, and I just had an instance of this just the other day where I was reading text and I completely took the intention of the text, in an unintentional way. So what I was reading was not even near what I thought the author was trying to convey to me. So again, learn how to communicate. One of the things that I would recommend also is don't infer emotion from written text, especially from like emails or chats. It's really hard to do that. I think with the advent of emojis and the mainstream usage of them kind of helps, right? So you can kind of tell, you can tell the reader what it is that you're doing. It could be a joke or it could be serious, right? You put maybe more of a cringe or grimace emoji, but at the end of the day, definitely, keep those communication skills improving, and then iterate on that as well. It's really important that we communicate proficiently so that, we can get things done quicker in our teams. So in closing, again, tech problems are not tech problems. We, again, are humans, right? And we form cultures when we're working in big teams or little teams, just in groups in general. And I want to ask, especially in this day and age, with everything that's going on, our lives are turned upside down. We're working remotely now, and we don't know how long this will be. But I definitely want to ask all of you as fellow humans to have a lot more empathy, work on these skills that I spoke of a little bit earlier, and yeah, move forward and build better cultures, right, for our teams, for our families. We definitely spend a lot more time with each other than we do in you know, with our families, especially on teams. You know, we can work from anywhere from 8 hours to 16 hours together. So yeah, we need to kind of be there for one another. And again, just build better cultures and treat each other with a modicum of love. So that's it for this talk. I appreciate you showing up and listening to me. And I look forward to meeting you all. And if anyone has any questions or want to reach out to me, my Twitter handle, punkdata, is the best way to get a hold of me. Thank you.